I'm Hazel, and if you had told me earlier in life where I'd find myself today, I wouldn't have believed you. I come from a modest, yet loving family. My father devoted himself to his window frame business, while my mother was the heart and soul of our home. We lived comfortably, though we weren't wealthy. My dad, always engulfed in his work, rarely brought his business home. He would arrive late, share a quick kiss with my mom, and casually ask about my day at school. That simplicity was enough for me. I was content in my bubble of youthful dreams. I was 24, fresh from college graduation, still sketching out my future, when I accidentally overheard my father on a phone call. His tone was laden with tension. "Absolutely not. I won't let you take over my company. I've worked too hard for this," he argued. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but I couldn't pull myself away. My heart sank as I grasped the reality. His business was floundering. Why hadn't he mentioned anything? That evening, while we sat around the dinner table, I studied my father. He joked with my mom about her overcooked pot roast, but I could see the stress etched around his eyes. His smile didn't quite mask his unease. I felt compelled to act, yet I was clueless about business. Still, the thought of standing by while our family legacy disintegrated was unbearable. Determined, I began investigating the next day. It didn't take long to discover who was behind the hostile takeover attempt, a KGM businessman named William. His office was not far from our home. When I arrived, the receptionist gave me a skeptical look as I requested to see him. "Do you have an appointment?" she inquired with a raised eyebrow. "No, but it's urgent." "Please, just 5 minutes," I pleaded. Her expression softened slightly, and after a brief phone call, she directed me to the elevator. "Top floor," she instructed. The elevator ride seemed to last an eternity. As the door slid open, I was met by William himself. He was older than I had anticipated, with silver hair and piercing eyes. Well, he mused, eyeing me curiously. "What do we have here?" Gathering my courage, I introduced myself. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm Hazel Thompson. I'm here concerning my father's company, Thompson Windows." His eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Thompson's daughter? This is unexpected. Come in, let's talk." I followed him into his office, trying not to be overwhelmed by the opulent setting. He sat behind his desk and gestured for me to sit. Taking a deep breath, I made my plea. "Please don't take over my father's company. It means everything to him. There must be another way." Caldwell leaned back, eyeing me thoughtfully. "Interesting," he mused. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Thompson. I'll leave your father's company alone if you agree to marry my son." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Marry my son, help him mature a bit. Do that, and your father's company is safe." I left Caldwell's office in a daze. Marry his son? Was he serious? Yet the more I considered it, the more I realized I had few options. It was either accept this bizarre arrangement or watch my father's life work collapse. The following day, I returned to that daunting office. Caldwell greeted me with a smug smile. "So, Miss Thompson, have you made your decision?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'll do it. I'll marry your son." Caldwell clapped his hands in delight. "Excellent. Let's introduce you two, shall we?" Before I knew it, my life had taken a path I never could have imagined. I was led into a new room, and there stood Caldwell's son. Expecting a conventional, buttoned-up businessman, I was instead greeted by a man who was the complete opposite. He was tall, with tousled dark hair and an easy, crooked smile. "Hey," he said, reaching out his hand. "I'm Hudson. You must be Hazel." As I shook his hand, I tried to conceal my surprise. "Yeah, that's me." Hudson's father coughed slightly, breaking the moment. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted." As the door clicked shut behind him, Hudson's relaxed facade fell away. He ran his fingers through his hair, his comfort fading. "Look, I'm sorry about this. My dad, he's a bit traditional." I shrugged, playing it cool. "It's fine. We're both adults. We can manage, right?" Hudson's laugh was strained. "Yeah, just a casual arranged marriage. No big deal, right?" We spent the next hour chatting, and despite my initial reservations, I found Hudson intriguing. He was intelligent and humorous, though he seemed a touch reckless. I understood why his father was eager for him to mature. Over the following weeks, Hudson and I began to spend more time together. Dinners, movies, typical dates, yet an awkward tension lingered. It was all pretend, a staged romance. And 3 months after our initial meeting in Caldwell's office, I found myself walking down the aisle. My father was radiant with pride, oblivious to the agreement that saved his business. As I recited my vows, I looked into Hudson's eyes. They didn't hold love, but there was a sense of camaraderie. Perhaps that was enough. The wedding reception passed in a whirl of well wishes and bubbly. Hudson's mother, Madison, pulled me aside, her smile sharp. "Welcome to the family, dear," she cooed, her tone laced with feigned warmth. "I do hope you'll make Hudson happy." I returned her smile, equally forced. "I'll certainly try, Mrs. Norrell." As we departed for our honeymoon, I noticed Hudson's father, a smug smile on his face, pleased with his orchestration. A surge of resentment washed over me. This was all just a strategic play for him. The initial years of our marriage were indeed an adjustment. Hudson and I lived comfortably in a spacious house funded by his father's fortune, more like roommates than spouses. I made an effort to steer Hudson in a positive direction, and gradually, he began to take his responsibilities more seriously, earning his father's approval. This gave me a small sense of victory, that perhaps our arrangement held some merit. However, Hudson's mother remained a challenge, her disapproval always palpable. She never voiced her criticisms, but her expression spoke volumes, the slight pursing of her lips telling me all I needed to know about her feelings towards me. As we settled into our unconventional married life, I pondered the future, hopeful yet uncertain. Every time she spoke, her words would sting with backhanded compliments. "Oh, Hazel, that dress is interesting. It's so brave of you to wear something like that," she'd say. I'd clench my jaw and force a smile, responding, "Thank you, Mrs. Norr." Despite these challenges, I clung to hope that maybe, just maybe, Hudson and I could find love in our marriage, especially if we had children. However, life had different plans. It was a crisp autumn day when Hudson and I, sitting in the silence of the doctor's office, were hit with devastating news. "I'm sorry," the doctor said with a gentle voice, "but the tests show that you, Mr. Caldwell, are unable to father children." The words struck me hard. No children. The very thing I hoped would bring us closer and solidify our marriage was now out of reach. That night, as I lay awake, my thoughts drifted to my father, whose business had thrived since my marriage to Hudson, even doubling its turnover. While I was genuinely happy for him, I felt adrift, longing for a purpose beyond just being Hudson's wife. When I suggested working to Hudson, his response was immediate and dismissive. "Why would you need to work? We have more than enough money." But it wasn't about the money. I wanted to do something meaningful. He simply shook his head. "In our circle, wives don't work. They do charity. Why don't you start a foundation or something?" And so, the Hazel Caldwell Foundation for Children with Cancer was born. It wasn't the path I had envisioned for myself, but it gave me a sense of purpose. I dedicated myself to organizing fundraisers, visiting hospitals, and doing all I could to help. Hudson seemed indifferent to my new passion, as he did to most things concerning me. We lived side by side, yet our lives barely touched. A decade slipped by, and then the world shifted once again when Hudson's father died suddenly of a heart attack. Overnight, Hudson was the new CEO, burdened by the immense responsibilities. 4 years later, more bad news arrived. Hudson's mother was diagnosed with cancer. "We should move her to a care facility," Hudson suggested distantly. But she refused, insisting, "I will die in my own home." Drawing upon my experience from the foundation, I took charge of her care, arranging for nurses, coordinating treatments, and spending hours by her bedside. To my surprise, Madison's attitude toward me softened. One day, as I adjusted her pillows, she grasped my hand and said, "You're a good woman, Hazel." "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Tears welled up in my eyes as I whispered back, "Thank you, Mrs. Norr." 6 years have passed since Hudson took over his father's company. I wish I could say things improved, but Hudson's behavior became more erratic. He drank heavily, came home at odd hours, and snapped over trivial matters. Then one day, I received a call. Hudson's mother, Mrs. Knorr, had reached out to me in concern after noticing Hudson hadn't shown up at the office for several days. When Hudson returned home late one night, the stench of alcohol heavy on him, I couldn't hold back my concern any longer. "Hudson, what's going on?" "Your assistant is worried, and you've been missing work," I said, trying to understand his sudden change in behavior. His response was a bitter laugh. "Work? Why bother? The company is failing. It's sinking just like the mess my father left behind, and I can't save it." I was stunned to hear him speak so casually of his and our livelihood vanishing. Despite his lack of initiative, I was desperate to find a solution. I reached out to my father, who, though semi-retired, was willing to help. He offered Hudson a position as his deputy, hoping to mentor him back to his former industrious self. However, Hudson's heart wasn't in it. He continued to underperform, arriving late and leaving early, and our company's performance began to suffer significantly. One evening, after noticing Hudson had been drinking, I decided it was time to confront him. "Hudson, we need to discuss your commitment to work. You're affecting the business," I began, hoping to spark some sense of responsibility in him. His reaction was one of anger. "Blame me, huh? I never wanted any of this, the job, this life. Even our marriage. I'm just waiting to sell my mom's house once she's gone," he retorted with a cold, mocking laugh. I was appalled. "How can you be so cruel? Your mother is ill, and all you think about is the money," I replied, disgusted by his callousness. "We're both trapped in a marriage neither of us wants," he shot back, equally disgusted. As I turned to leave, I came face to face with Hudson's mother. Her expression reflected deep sadness, yet understanding. She squeezed my hand silently, sharing a moment of mutual sorrow and acknowledgement. Tragedy struck shortly after, with a call informing me that my parents had died in a plane crash. Devastated, I faced the funeral alone. Hudson was absent. Standing by my parents' graves, I felt utterly abandoned. After the funeral, my grief turned to anger. How could Hudson abandon me at such a time? I went to confront him at the office, finding him arrogantly settled in my father's chair. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking with anger. He barely looked up, annoyed. "What now, Jules? Can't you see I'm busy?" "Busy? You couldn't even show up for my parents' funeral," I exclaimed. He rolled his eyes dismissively. "Enough with your moral high ground, Jules. I'm tired of your constant nagging. That was the last straw. I'm done, Hudson. I'm done with all of this," I declared, shocked but resolute. I witnessed a chilling transformation in his demeanor. The fury in his eyes was swiftly replaced by a calculating coldness. "You know, this company is valued at about $21 million, he began, his voice eerily calm. "And now, as the deputy director, it all belongs to me?" My heart sank as he spoke. "What are you talking about?" I asked, disbelief clouding my voice. He leaned back in my father's chair, a smug smile spreading across his face. "I'm the deputy director now. I have all the passwords, access to every account. I'm in charge." His words were a hammer to my hope. "You can't do this," I managed, my voice trembling. "You've already driven your father's business to ruin. I won't let you destroy my father's legacy as well." Hudson's laughter was cold and harsh. "I'm not going to run it into the ground. I'm going to dismantle it, sell it off piece by piece, and live like a king." Before I could react, he turned to the computer and began transferring a large sum to his personal account. "There," he said, turning to face me again. "That should keep me comfortable for a while." As if to add insult to injury, he casually reached into his desk, pulling out a stack of papers and tossed them at me. "And here are the divorce papers. I think it's time we ended this charade, don't you?" I caught the papers instinctively, my mind reeling from the rapid onslaught of betrayals. This was too much, too fast. My parents gone, my marriage over, my father's company slipping through my fingers. I left his office in a daze. the divorce papers clutched in my hand. But as I walked, something within me shifted. For years, I had succumbed to Hudson's manipulations. No longer. It was time to fight back. With renewed resolve, I made my way to my father's lawyer's office. Mr. John had been a trusted confidant of my dad's for years. "Hazel," he greeted me, rising from his seat. "I'm so sorry to hear about your parents. How are you holding up?" I collapsed into the chair across from him, pouring out the day's harrowing events. Mr. John listened intently, his expression darkening with each word I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back, a determined smile touching his lips. "Hazel, there's something you should know about your father's will. He made some changes just before the accident." He began reading the will, and with every word, I felt a burden lifting from my shoulders. The company was mine, left to me by my father, not Hudson. But there was more. Mr. John looked up, a gleam in his eyes. "Your father fired Hudson 5 weeks before his passing. He has no authority here." A genuine laugh escaped my lips, the first in what felt like an eternity. "So, all of Hudson's orders were void." Mr. John confirmed it, and then handed me an envelope. "There's one more thing, a letter from your father." Tears blurred my vision as I read my father's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Hazel," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry for leaving you this way, but I hope I've equipped you with everything you need to build the life you deserve. The company is yours, and Jules, it's time to let go of Hudson. You've sacrificed enough for that marriage. It's time to live for yourself. I love you, sweetheart. Make me proud." Looking up at Mr. John, I wiped my eyes. "Do you have a pen?" Without a word, he handed me one. Signing the divorce papers Hudson had thrown at me felt liberating with each stroke of the pen. "Can you file these?" I asked, handing them back. "I want this done quickly." Mr. John nodded. "Consider it done." As I stepped out of his office, I felt truly free for the first time in years. No more Hudson. No more being puppeteered by others. On impulse, I pulled out my phone and dialed Riley, my best friend from the charity foundation. It was time to start anew on my own terms. Hazel texted Riley, proposing a coffee catch-up, excited to share some significant updates. Soon after, they found themselves in their favorite cafe, each cradling a warm latte. With a curious glance, Riley prompted Hazel, "So, what's this big news?" Taking a deep breath, Hazel shared everything: her breakup with Hudson, the upheaval at her company, and her ongoing divorce. Riley, eyes wide with surprise and sympathy, squeezed Hazel's hand across the table, offering encouragement. "Girl, you're free now and you're in charge." Despite her friend's enthusiasm, Hazel was hesitant. "Do you think I can really manage the company on my own?" Riley looked at her firmly. "Hazel, you've been handling that charity foundation brilliantly for years. You're smart, organized, and genuinely care about people. You'll be an incredible CEO." Heartened by their conversation, Hazel felt rejuvenated and ready to confront the next challenge, retrieving her belongings from the house she never truly considered home. There, she encountered her mother-in-law, Madison, looking weary from her cancer treatment. Softly, Hazel announced her intention to collect her items and mentioned the divorce. To Hazel's surprise, Madison's eyes teared up. "I haven't always been kind to you," she admitted, "but you've been so good to me. Would you let me come with you?" Before Hazel could respond, the front door burst open and Hudson stormed in, furious over the frozen company accounts. Standing her ground, Hazel declared the funds and the company were never his to claim, revealing that her father had already dismissed him from his position and barred him from the premises. Noticing his mother packing, Hudson's anger deepened, blaming her for his faults. As he ranted, Hazel and Madison quietly packed. The drive to Hazel's parents' house was somber, with Madison resting from the day's stress. Upon arrival, Hazel helped her weary mother-in-law into the house, offering her the familiar comfort of her parents' room. "Are you sure?" Madison asked, taking in the new surroundings, her eyes wide and grateful. Hazel reassured her, feeling a sense of closure and new beginnings as they settled into their new, unexpected chapter together. I acknowledged the tightness in my throat, agreeing quietly, yes, I believe they would have preferred it this way. As I assisted Madison in getting comfortable, a complex wave of emotions washed over me. I mourned the loss of my parents, felt relief at being free of Hudson, and faced uncertainty about what lay ahead. Yet, beneath it all, there was a flicker of hope. Taking over my father's company felt like leaping into deep water without knowing how to swim. Those initial months were packed with endless meetings, financial reviews, and countless sleepless nights. Determined to succeed, I enlisted the help of Tom, a skilled business factory who became my indispensable advisor. "You have sharp instincts, Hazel," he would often remind me, encouraging me to trust in them. Gradually, I started to gain confidence. By the 3-month mark, I wasn't just keeping my head above water. I was thriving, making strides that even improved the company's performance, which filled me with immense pride. My father would have been proud. Alongside my corporate responsibilities, my commitment to the Cancer Foundation deepened. It connected me to my past and illuminated my path forward. Madison's health declined over time, and I devoted myself to her care, ensuring her comfort during her final days. Our relationship grew stronger, healing old rifts and building a bond one had never imagined possible. When she passed, I held her hand, thanking her softly for everything, and she offered a weak smile before slipping away peacefully. I organized the funeral meticulously, though Hudson's absence was a harsh reminder of his downward spiral. Shortly after, Mr. John summoned me to his office. To my surprise, Hudson was there with a new girlfriend, flaunting a cocky grin. "Well, if it isn't the little CEO," he sneered. "Don't worry, I'm just here for my inheritance. Blood is thicker than water, right?" As Mr. Joe began reading Madison's will, I watched Hudson's smugness turn to shock and then to rage. Madison had left her house and all her savings to me, with instructions to donate it to the Cancer Foundation. Tears welled up in my eyes at her generosity. Meanwhile, Hudson erupted, accusing me of manipulation and greed, but his girlfriend, clearly disillusioned, quickly left him behind. Walking out of the office, I left Hudson's angry rants fading in the distance. I felt a profound sense of freedom. Madison's bequest was more than financial. It was a testament to her trust and regard for me, affirming that she truly saw and valued who I was.